Recording in progress.
Okay. I call to order the December 19th Communications Committee. Roll call, please.
Chairman Gould,
Here.
Alderman Plufka.
Here.
Blaine Thomas.
Here.
All members present.
And next on the agenda is the agenda approval. Have both of you been able to take a look at it? Any changes or anything? No. All right, we'll approve that by acclamation. Next is the committee chair and report. My report, I appreciate all the hard work and adjustment and trying to go out and provide a lot of our, the data analytics and kind of improve the communication. So I applaud staff on all that, but that's all I have. Alderman Plufka.
I would say the same thing, other than the fact that I think that we were just talking about the fact as the meeting was getting started that 24 is shaping up to be an eventful year, and I think for communications as well, we've got people in place, we've got analytics, and we've got an anticipated effort at trying to do some branding and improve our communications. I think it's going to be a real interesting year next year.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Yeah, looking at the agenda this morning, a lot of good stuff in here, so thank you.
Great. So without further ado, then we'll move on to the city administrator report. Our first is an exciting calendar update.
That's really me.
Oh, okay.
Well, the meetings typically are on Tuesday, but these fall because of the holiday, they conflict with the Board of Aldermen. So the January meeting and the February meeting need to be reconsidered. Dates need to be reconsidered. So the January 16th date could be either the 9th, you could go earlier, a week earlier, or the 23rd, a week later. And the February date's the same, earlier or later.
And I know that according to the last meeting, as far as the potential timeline of the RFP, it was first of the year so that we could by March-ish get a response. Would it be better for us to shift the January 1 to the 9th so that we could kind of review that and then provide, because I would assume would we need to have full board approval of that RFP or just?
No, it's,
okay.
If you all are comfortable with everything you've heard so far, we just release it.
Okay. So given that potential of wanting to kind of get that out in the first of the year, is staff comfortable with the 9th? Unless there's any bigger changes.
Right, we're good.
Okay. Are you guys available on the 9th, both of you?
Yes.
So I would say the January 9th would be preferred for the first meeting. The second meeting, I think, again, could be based on what, do we think we'd have enough coming out of that to have it earlier, or should we just push it to later in February? What do you guys think?
Either be the 6th or the 27th. Scheduled for the 20th.
I'd probably say let's do the 27th, since it's closer to the original date.
Sure.
But, I mean, what do you guys think? Let me just check all of these. I thought I had checked, let's see, January 9th. February. So far, I don't have any conflicts on either of those, so.
Okay. Thank you very much. Change the calendar so that those dates are reflected.
Wonderful. Guess that's it for your report. Okay, then we'll move on to the department reports. Presentation of the data analytics.
Yes, so as I talked about last month, each month at the meeting, I'll just kind of present where we're at in terms of our social media analytics, numbers, things like that. I'm attempting something new this month in the way that I'm presenting these numbers. So you'll see I've attached all of the really detailed reports, but I also kind of brought them all together in one place in that PowerPoint. So it's broken down into year-to-date, month-to-date, and week-to-date, just to give us a really good broad view of what we're looking at. So year to date, we're seeing just pretty much growth across the board, which is great. Clicks are a little bit down, but that is something that we can work on, and that's why we keep an eye on analytics so that we know where we need to kind of put a little bit more effort. We saw the most growth during January, May, and August. And our total number of messages sent, which is posts made, is up a great amount. So we're doing great there. And our highest percentage of impressions occurred between August and December. So impressions are like people interacting with our posts. And we saw the most post engagement spike in September. And then, bringing it down a little bit more focused, month to date, again, seeing really, really impressive growth in terms of impressions and engagement. Clicks up over 400% in the last month, which is really impressive. As same as our posts made, over almost 300% growth in the number of posts that we've made in the last month. And we began posting videos this month, which were more so like animations, just to kind of get a feel for what our audience would respond to. And overwhelmingly, we saw a really great response with that. So I know, that's something that we can look at moving forward, how we want to continue utilizing videos and where we can kind of grow in that regard. And week to date, we saw a little bit of a drop in the last week, and I really attribute that to the fact that our big holiday events have kind of come and gone. So now we're in this weird lull between when our holiday events occur and when the holidays actually are. So I'm not really concerned with the drop that we're seeing this last week. It'll come back, but it's always good to look at things on these different levels just to make sure we know where we're at. And then just a few items to kind of take note of. We did officially launch a Facebook page for the fire department. There was an unofficial Facebook page run by the firefighters themselves. This is an official City of Brentwood Fire Department page to match the official City of Brentwood Police Department page. And I worked with the chief on that so that, and I said, I don't want to step on any toes with the firefighters page, but this is important that we have this official page. He's in agreement. He says his firefighters are in agreement. So now we kind of look at the process of building that page up, promoting it, and kind of moving forward with that. So, so that's just some of the things that we've come to focus on this last month in terms of social media.
Okay, you guys.
Question. So do you see, I know you're just getting started with this. Is the goal to build it to a certain level of exchange and communication, and is there a seasonality to it, or is the effort to try to get, instead of a lot of these peaks and valleys, that there may be a little bit more of a sort of a flat line, if you will, at a higher level? That's just.
I think the general consensus is you always want to see growth. That said, I can't really speak to that right now because I'm still really learning where we're at, where our audience lives, things like that. So I don't want to speak prematurely about where our end goal should be before I kind of have a few more months of really seeing what's kind of going on. And you speaking to that seasonality, I don't know because I haven't been through a full season yet. So I feel like, and I know this can be a little frustrating, but really it's going to be the next year of just seeing where the attention is, where our audience lives, seeing what they respond to versus what they don't. And then this time next year, we'll have a really great idea of kind of moving forward what we want to do.
So did you see, you said there was a spike in September. I'm assuming that was maybe issue driven, having to do with Green Street and the development and passage of the development plan.
Also, Brentwood Days occurred
sure.
in September. Back to school. Sometimes it just is about when events are happening, because that's generally, you're going to generate more posts about those events, and then that in turn is going to generate more engagement.
So is it just kind of is the attitude next year as you're gathering all this, is it going to be kind of trial and error a little bit?
A little bit, and I speak to that kind of towards in the next discussing social media strategies.
Okay.
I'm considering us in a testing period right now, seeing what works and what doesn't. I will continue to make sure that posts are being done about all of our events coming up, but then filling in those gaps with other types of posts and what those types of posts will be, whether they're human interest, things like that. We'll test it out and see what sticks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I know that when we first sort of breathed new life into this committee, one of the things that Bola and I talked about was eventually getting to a content strategy and a calendar that we could then start to predict, what are those key moments that we definitely know we want to capitalize on to make sure that we're getting communication out there and engagement. And then once we have that established, then we can react to things throughout the year. But I think you generally will see peaks and valleys of when interest is going on, and that's when I think that's when it gets fun, when you can, okay, what do we do to fill in those gaps? And
Exactly.
That's where maybe those
We'll
human interest
likely
stories
see
come into play.
more valleys in the really cold dead of winter, just because there's not as much fun stuff going on. And so, yeah, it's going to turn into determining how best to fill those gaps and, kind of share happy news with people who are just stuck inside because it's so cold. So, yeah, I'm going to continue to develop kind of that strategy, and as time goes on, we'll be able to speak more to maybe a content calendar.
Yeah, two things. First one's a comment. I think this is awesome. Super good to meet you, Blaine Thomas.
Yes,
here.
you too.
Yeah, sorry that I missed last time.
Worries.
I actually have a slight anecdote, I guess. I was walking through the new park a week or so ago, and the Christmas lights were on, and it was kind of funny. It was like, this is a very picturesque image of our town. So I'm really excited to see how we can, with this like refresh content strategy, how we can leverage some of those like kind of like picturesque moments that we get to have here. Because I think it's unique. You don't get that everywhere in the country as well as in St. Louis. So
You'll see me, I know I've spoken with Bull about this, you'll see me at most city events taking pictures.
Cool.
I do have some good photos of the Christmas decorations up at the park, and I actually went with Assistant Chief Bernie to get some drone pictures. Granted, they're during the day, but you can still see the tree and things like that. So I'm working on building up a photo library so that we have those photos to fall back on. So yes, it looks great.
yeah, that's awesome. My one question, and I apologize if we talked about this last week. When we look at our social media, do we have a cohesive goal on what the purpose of that is? Whether that's like a kind of a public service announcement versus like branding our city for business. Do we have that?
It hasn't been formally discussed, but I think we should have both.
Yeah. I'm not saying that they can't.
Yeah.
I think that you would, in a perfect world, they would live together. I was just curious if that was ever in the past that like we are going to use our social media for X, and if we would have to walk any of that back.
Right. So I think that with Michelle's presence, it gives us the opportunity to explore that even further and do an even better job on that. If you look at some of the local magazines, you'll see other cities during the holiday run full ad about businesses in their town, or just maybe over the summer back to school run ads. So I would like for us to get to that point where we're actively marketing the city and not just talking about fun things that we do, or Brentwood Park, Brentwood Bound, other things like that. Full-blown strategy, and it would take working conjointly with planning and development and myself to execute that properly. So that's a goal, aspirational goal that I have for the city, and with Michelle's presence here, we can now fully roll that out.
That's awesome.
I know Bola and I have discussed in like the Brentwood Bulletin, starting to do more like profiles on local businesses, really highlighting those. So in the January Brentwood Bulletin, there will be a profile on the Kitchen Conservatory.
Good.
To
That's what I was gonna say.
I did that interview a couple weeks ago to kind of jumping off from the ribbon cutting. So that's something that I'm looking to kind of get more in depth into, really highlighting Brentwood businesses.
Yeah, I mean, these are really important things that we've been discussing, pieces and parts that, to create that foundation and strategy. And I think that, you know, some of the things that we talk about later in this agenda really go hand in hand with that. My question too is, as we looked at the analytics, just curious on what our main focus of metrics really should be, right? So, for example, clicks for a business or somebody who's looking to buy product, you know, draw people to a call to action to purchase or a good or service. I get why clicks are probably the most important. It's the qualified lead. It's what they're, you know, what you want them to ultimately do. Is there a purpose for looking at that as a metric for us? Or does it depend on department? For example, you know, maybe Parks Department is a little bit different. They would like clicks, you know. What do you think are what's the most important metrics? Impressions, engagements, clicks, et cetera.
For us, I'm definitely focusing more on impressions and engagement.
Yeah.
That said, there are posts that encourage clicks. Like if we're linking to a article, we obviously can't put the entire article in the body of a post. So we would want people to click and read the full article. So we're kind of half and half in terms of posts that require a click versus posts that don't. But yeah, because we're looking at the analytics of our presence across the board, which includes the police department, now the fire department, Parks and Rec, and us. In the future, if you guys want, I can divide those out and look at individual analytics for each of the accounts.
There might be a different strategy
Yeah.
for each one.
Absolutely. So if that's something that you guys would be interested in seeing, even if we do it every other month, we look at it really more in depth, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we need to have a filter as we look at this. The data's great, and we're starting to look at it, and we're starting to gain some insight on what's happening. But we also need to filter and not get upset. Oh, if we see clicks drop, right?
Right.
Is that really the main focus of this page or that page, right? So I think we just, as a committee, we should probably just make sure we understand what those filters are, and as a city, we do too, so that when we look at these, we know what we're reacting to.
Because, you know, if you remember, you've heard the fire chief talk about how some of our residents, a good number of them, I don't remember the percentage, prefer, instead of calling 911, to call the department directly. And so there was an education, a push to try to redirect them to that. And once that campaign is over, maybe the number of clicks to the fire department drops.
Right.
So, but knowing what's going on would give you perspective about why there's a drop.
At least for next month, I'll plan to really divide out the analytics and look at the individual accounts, and that'll give us a better view of kind of what we're seeing. If clicks mostly are coming from the parks posts, but engagement mostly is coming from the city's posts, and comments are coming from, you know, it'll just give us a better idea. So next month, at least, I'll plan to really divvy it out, and then we can go from there.
And then part of that, just as an aside or a comment, I've noticed on the city page when we post about meetings coming up, rather than, or maybe in addition to posting the link to the calendar part of the page, a link to the board docs agenda would be good, so that people know, because I think a lot of times people don't know what the meeting's about. So if we make it easy for them to get to board docs and understand what's on the agenda, that might be something to consider. And then as far as the fire Facebook page, what happens to the Facebook page that the firefighters, are they going to continue to work, keep that open and just sort of have their own community?
It's independently run by the fire department, or by the firefighters themselves. I'm not going to tell them that they have to delete it, but the chief has made it clear to them that the page that myself and then he will also be involved in running it, that is the official city-sanctioned Facebook page of the Brentwood Fire Department.
Okay, great. Any other questions on that part? All right, let me get to Awesome. So next up is the continued discussion for the strategy for social media posts. So we sort of tipped our toe into some of that, but anything else to say on that item?
We talked a little bit about how I still consider us in the testing phase. I'm really trying to grasp a good understanding of what our audience responds to. That in turn will lend itself to creating a really robust and solid social media strategy. One objective that I would like to work towards is a cohesiveness across all of our brand. That is the city, parks, police, fire, kind of a little bit more of us working together to promote the city as opposed to us all operating in our own silos. I don't have much information on that effort at present, but it's something that I plan to work towards as the new year kind of dawns.
Yeah, I think we all is part of why we are here is we'd like to see that happen. Alderman Plufka.
I wonder if there's a way to, in the course of how we do things in this committee, that whether the committee might be able to help with that in terms of trying to distill almost like a mission statement or a motto or whatever you want to call it, but have it be very few words to say that our goal is to promote, inform, and you know, some phraseology that would convey that we want to provide safety information. You know what I mean? That those are the three aims, so to speak, of our social media platform: is to promote the city, inform our residents, and keep everybody safe. And that'll mean different things in different departments,
Right.
but it'll still have a theme that will still override everything.
So kind of my whole agenda tonight works one off of the other.
Right.
And so the next item that we were going to discuss is kind of how we plan to measure, I guess, my success in the role as communications manager. And that will speak a little bit to kind of what you're talking about. So a little bit more to that now, or we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I do think they all kind of go hand in hand, and so I don't think you have any pushback from this committee that we should be more cohesive as whether it's voice or even look and feel across all of it, so that there's continuity to where people kind of know, okay, yeah, they're still part of Brentwood, even though they might have their own
Right.
slight tweak to them. It's still a Brentwood community.
Right. I mean, I think the cohesiveness, clearly you want to have that. I wonder if we shouldn't, as a committee, be spending the next couple of months trying to decide what are the themes that we're coalescing behind.
Yeah, and maybe that takes us to the next one, so go ahead and roll into
Okay.
that if you'd like.
So kind of Bola asked me kind of what is my goal here, and I think that there isn't right now a clear-cut goal in terms of what I am hoping to achieve in my role here. There's not necessarily a strategic plan in place that would lay out specific goals for the communications department. I met with a group called St. Louis Regional Communicators, which is communications and marketing people from municipalities and cities across the area, and I was able to talk with the people from Wentzville, and they actually just recently in the last couple of years have completed something called a communications audit, which then led into them creating a comprehensive communications plan for the city. I've attached both of those to the board docs. I think that creating something along those lines for the city of Brentwood would then lend itself to answering some of the questions that you had, Alderman Plufka, about, kind of what is our mission in terms of the communications from the city. And then it lends itself not only to social media, but to media relations and messaging, branding. It all kind of falls under that category of an overall communications plan. And so I feel strongly that we should consider looking into possibly doing a communications audit, which would give us an idea of just across the board, would take a really in-depth look at our communications channels and efforts, where our audience is, who our audience is, demographics, things like that, and then use that information to develop a communications plan. Now, this is something that an outside agency would help us do. Bola and I will meet with the City of Wentzville's marketing communications team after the first of the year to kind of just pick their brain and see how they went about this process. They are quite a bit bigger than us, but I think that there's a lot of value to us really strongly considering doing something like this because we don't have an overall strategic plan, just to give the communications department a little bit more direction, give us attainable goals, something to work towards.
So, I mean, the first thing that I'm struck by is the question of which one comes first, right? I mean, I think when we first started kind of this committee and talked about, oh, we should do an audit, and then it kind of went to, you know, because we don't know how our residents prefer to be communicated to through what means as far as the channel, and then also, you know, what they are resonating with. And then we also have this issue that we feel is this disparate look and feel and tone throughout the city, and maybe wayfinding and signage, and due for a little bit of a refresh. So we shifted to the branding. I think all are very important, and as we know with Hanley Industrial and even just any new redevelopment potentials, you know, branding and all of that is very important. It lays the foundation for all of those. So do you feel like this could be rolled into that, or does one need to happen before the other?
I think that we could potentially roll it into the branding. Roll it into the branding RFP, because to me, it makes more sense to take on communications plan and branding together and then hold off on the other things that we were discussing, as in the Hanley Industrial rebrand and any other sort of rebrand. To me, you handle the overall brand of the city, which to me, the branding is part of the communications plan.
Yeah.
So they kind of go hand in hand. So my suggestion would be we get those two together in that RFP, and then once we have solidified the brand itself and our communications objectives, then we can move on and use, ideally, the existing branding that we already really like for projects like Hanley Industrial.
I mean, I don't disagree. I think any good agency would probably want to do a bit of a strategy foundation before they came back and said, here's what your brand should be. So I guess the last time we met, you know, the discussion was looking at the RFP to try to weave in Hanley Industrial rebrand as a good example of applying the new brand look. So is the strategy now slightly different with this new new information that we're finding?
It really depends on where you want it to go. If you remember, we saved money by piggybacking on the Parks Master Plan, those specific questions that you all had. And so I believe that survey of our residents is done. I need to ask Eric to have them come present before you all what was the outcome to those questions that you had. So that answers that part. But ideally, that's where we started. You're right. The conversation, was it last year or this year? I'm not sure when this committee started. It could be an addendum or a subcategory of the RFP, and then you can pick and choose whether you want to do it both or just do one or the other. It gives you flexibility.
Well, and I wonder too, is it you know, limiting if we want to have you know, maybe some branding agencies don't have the strategy department, right? And there may be two different consultants that would need to do this. Ideally, it would be somebody who could do it all.
Actually, the agency, correct me if I'm wrong, that did
Wentzville's?
this plan for Wentzville is someone we're familiar with.
Okay.
They've done the economic development sales tax for us here
Okay.
in Brentwood, the use tax for us, and they did both. So there are some agencies that can do both, and when we present that to you, flexibility to decide who you
sure.
pick.
Okay.
Not to say that I don't want to insinuate with my following comment that I want to rip off what Wentzville did here. However, my in-laws were in town this weekend, and when they are in St. Louis, they see St. Louis. Understanding that, I think in St. Louis we like to think about us as Brentwood, Kirkwood, Webster, Wentzville, St. Charles. Wentzville isn't that dissimilar from Brentwood. When we look at the preferences that maybe a citizen of Wentzville would have, I would be halfway confident to say that it's relatively similar to maybe the preferences that somebody in Brentwood would have. Would we feel comfortable to make the bet and say, hey, Wentzville has all this data. What if we trust this data and don't have to redo it?
We often do that with most
Okay.
things.
So I'm just like, because reading through some of this, I was like, I completely agree. And if this was like a, I say that to say that, do we need to redo most of this, or could we just take like how they say Gen Z wants to be communicated with?
I
And
think you all should really decide, because you live in the community, and hopefully you know your neighbors well, and what is it that attracts you to Brentwood versus Wentzville or any other community?
Well, and it's one thing to try to predict and to identify how people want to be communicated with, or what their preferences are in those areas, demographically and by generation and things like that. But in terms of the aims of the community, I mean, Wentzville is growing at a unprecedented clip. It's the fastest growing community in the state of Missouri. We are not. I mean, we are 99.999% developed. There is no undeveloped area of Brentwood. It would seem to me that the mission of our communications would have to take a lead from that, and recognize that, we are 8,000 people. We are 700 individuals in a school district. We are, surrounded on all sides by similar communities, but we also have a kind of a unique business district that doesn't exist in a lot of other cities that are this close to the city of St. Louis. I mean, we do have some unique features, and maybe some of those things. I understand the sentiment issue about, this is how they want to digest information through social media, through other means. But I would think that the message might be from Brentwood might be more unique than you think.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's okay.
From my perspective, our guidepost as a city government is not necessarily the growth of the community in terms of like people, but more of the economic development of the city, and then speaking to our current residents. And so in that terms, it does differ from a place like Wentzville, who I think right now is very growth-centered because they are building up so much.
Well, and we're on the brink of providing our residents, for the first time in the history of the existence of the city, we're on the brink of providing them an unprecedented area for recreation, for gathering, for things like that. And communications should play a role in how we promote that, and how we teach folks that live in this community how you can use the park, and as you get used to it, how you can use the playground and the trail system. And as all that stuff comes online in the next 12 months, our ability to communicate that to our residents is going to be really important.
Yeah, I think our Parks Department has done a phenomenal job in really putting a focus on increasing quality and frequency of programming. And I, at recent ward meetings, you hear it from people. I'm.
In fact, today,
I'm-
they're out doing a strategic plan to plan programs for next year.
Right, so,
To what you're
you
saying.
know, and so, I think that's what our focus is. How do we get our community who, for the most part, there are smallish groups of people who are engaged and pay attention. And then there's a lot of people who just,
Yeah.
you know, don't
Any
don't even
community.
know what's right next to them happening, you know, for the,
But they all came out for the holiday party. There were
Right.
lots of
Right.
families, lots of kids. So
And
to
you're
that
he-
degree,
yeah.
where do you see this going?
I mean, I think that, I think to Blaine's point, there's certainly, there's a lot of information in there, a lot of data, a lot of conclusions that I think we could probably say, you know what, we wouldn't need to have somebody spend
All of
time
this?
duplicating that, right? But how do we drill down and make strategy decisions on the uniqueness of our community and layer in some of these other common things that would be certainly good to have in a guide, but we don't need to necessarily have somebody spend time and money to develop a duplication of that, right? So I think that's where, you know,
Maybe it starts with the presentation of that questionnaire.
Yes. We'll bring that to the next meeting.
The data that comes out of that that might look like for Brentwood. Yeah. Without having to engage, not having to engage somebody to start from scratch and do all.
but it becomes kind of maybe it's a culmination of all of this information that we believe is accurate for Brentwood. And it becomes, here's the brief for what we know, now tell us what we don't know, and here are the gaps, right? And
Right.
and fill those things in for us so that we have a more comprehensive look at this thing.
Make some educated guesses based on what you know, as to how you think our residents are going to react to A, B, C, and D.
So I think just trying to get an idea of what my marching orders are in terms of the RFP, which we're looking at releasing in the next few weeks. Are we what do we
Yeah,
want?
no, I think it's a fair comment because we're sort of having an open discussion about this. I mean, what you brought to us, which is an amazing document. I do still think that your instinct is correct that this in some form, this information is definitely more tied to helping to further the idea of creating a very nice, well-established packaged brand. And some benchmarks for what are our goals as it relates to communications to our residents. And
I mean, the
so I think your instinct is right that maybe pulling, instead of weaving in Hanley Industrial branding, some form of this strategy is probably, strategy language is probably good. But knowing that we don't need
Right.
probably the
So
full
maybe we
Wentzville.
hold off in releasing the RFP until after we meet with Wentzville and see what information we gather from that. And then based on that, maybe take another look at the RFP and see what we can still release.
Right.
We also, maybe for the January 9th meeting, could we also get that presentation?
I
and
just
that
sent an email to Eric asking.
and see if there's a way to start to incorporate that data into this,
yes.
so that as we put out the RFP, the expectation is that the agency that responds to it is going to not only provide graphic,
Guidelines and-
yeah, showing how we can be branded overall, and how we can incorporate still, older signage with
Right.
a more modern, thing that also reflects the data points that are in that information that come from our own demographics that
Right.
we know, and then we look at some of the things you've gathered over the last 12 months and say, here's what our residents respond to. What they seem to be reacting to is when we put out a post that says, hey, come join us on Thursday. Or when we put out a post that says, wasn't that a great holiday party last weekend? What is getting the most response out of our people?
Yes.
And shouldn't we play to that in putting this together?
Yes, from what you've said, I think there's definite benefit to including some of that language in the new RFP to kind of get some of the most important pieces of a communications plan while also still giving us time to really do our own research throughout the year.
Yeah.
So yes, I think we meet with Wentzville. If you guys are okay with maybe instead of
Yeah,
pushing the RFP out first of the year, we shoot for maybe the end of January.
Yeah, look, the RFP is important that we get it right. I don't want to rush and then have to, have agencies or consultants spend time responding to it and then change scope after, it happens all the
Agreed.
time.
Yeah,
But,
I'd like to avoid it if
but
we
I,
can.
but I think, given some of this new information, let's take the time, a little bit of time, instead of rushing to get it out first of the year, and let's get it out as soon as we can, but have it be.
I know it would be pushing it, but I will see if maybe we can get a meeting with Wentzville before our January 9th meeting. Tough.
I was gonna say, hey,
Wishful
it'd be impressive,
thinking.
it'd be impressive, but,
Yeah, but we'll see. Yeah,
yeah.
like you said, there's no need to rush something. We want to make sure it's done right.
So given that, do we want to revisit the first meeting of January, what we just discussed, and should we push it to the 23rd instead of the 9th?
We
and
could
then
definitely have a meeting with Wentzville by then.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, and that way we're not, I mean, having a meeting with one agenda item, we can have it be a little more.
Yeah, I'm fine with that if you guys are.
Is January 23rd a problem for you guys? Sorry that we're kind of bouncing back to that, but I think this new information is important.
Yeah, I'll be here as well.
Kelly, do you have that? Let's shift that January back to 23rd then, and then that gives you all
Yeah.
more time. And maybe we have something close to release after that.
And we're going that last Tuesday of February.
Oh, yeah,
Correct.
so then
Correct.
that's perfect.
Right, so that's actually kind of nice.
So it'll give
Yeah.
the right, yeah, it won't be almost a 2-month break, it'll be a month. Okay, great. I mean, I think, good stuff. Anything else on this whole department report?
One final comment. I can tell that y'all are putting a lot of thought into this, and it's awesome. So thank you.
Absolutely. So next on the agenda is the consent agenda. What's on there is the minutes. Motion to approve the minutes, right? All right. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, no old business, no new business. Citizen comments is the next on the agenda. I don't know that there's anybody online, no?
Online.
No further business. This meeting is adjourned.